They thought she was a threat. Just another black woman behind the wheel in a town that didn't like questions. So they stopped her, questioned her, made assumptions, but they didn't know the badge she carried them too. Because the woman they tried to intimidate was the new sheriff of the entire county, and what started as a routine stop would become the reckoning no one saw coming. The fog hadn't lifted yet. It clung low across the fields, brushing the ground like a secret too heavy to rise. The road cut through silence. 2 lanes, no shoulder, lined with bare trees still waking from winter. A black SUV moved steady through it all, windows down just enough to let in the breath of spring. Inside, a woman gripped the steering wheel loosely. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes stayed forward, focused, calm, prepared. Then came the flash. Blue, red, blue again, a stuttering dance in the rearview mirror. She blinked once. No rush, no panic, just the soft sigh of someone who'd seen this play before. Slowing to a stop, she eased the car onto a gravel pull-off that hadn't seen a fresh tire mark in months. The cruiser behind her remained still for a moment. Then its door opened, sharp and deliberate. The crunch of boots on gravel followed. One set of footsteps heavy, assured. The other lighter, more hesitant. She turned the engine off, rolled the window down the rest of the way, placed her hands on the wheel, where they could be seen. The first deputy approached. Mid-50s, the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile without suspicion. His uniform was stiff, his jaw tighter. He leaned slightly, not enough to be hostile, just enough to let you feel he could be. License and registration, ma'am. No greeting, no reason, no explanation. The woman didn't flinch. She reached into the center console slowly, movement smooth, deliberate. She handed him the documents. He took them without thanks, flipping them open with the same disinterest someone might give a takeout receipt. The second deputy lingered near the back of her vehicle, younger, restless. His eyes moved too quickly, plate, bumper, driver's face, like he was trying to spot something wrong before it had the chance to explain itself. "Where you headed this morning?" the older one asked, still not looking her in the eye. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at the mirror, watched the other deputy, adjusting his stance, hand resting too close to his belt. "Just passing through," she said, voice even. "This early?" A pause. Not suspicious, just slow. "I like to start my day before the town wakes up." The older deputy raised an eyebrow, as if the timing of her drive was more important than anything her license said. The younger one stepped closer, his breath now visible in the cool air. "Long way from where this plate's registered," he muttered. No one said why she'd been pulled over. They didn't have to. She could feel it, in the way they looked at her. Not with fear, not with respect, just disbelief. Like she didn't belong, like they needed to place her somewhere before they let her go. And still, neither of them asked the one question that mattered. Not what she did, not why she was here, not who she was. Because if they had, they might have realized they weren't the ones in control anymore. The older deputy held her license like it might confess something she wouldn't. His thumb rested on the edge, not flipping it, just pressing, like he was trying to make the ink sweat. The younger one leaned a little closer now, peering past the glass. His tone didn't raise, but it sharpened, like a stick being whittled. "You from around here?" She met his gaze, unblinking. "Not exactly." He tilted his head. "Passing through, something like that." The older one frowned, glancing again at her registration. "This route's not exactly scenic, ma'am. Most folks don't take it unless they've got a reason." "I do," she said. Calm, even, like someone reading the weather off a card. They waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. The younger deputy smirked. Not friendly, just tight-lipped and rehearsed. "You sure you're not lost?" She didn't smile, didn't flinch, just blinked slowly, once. "No," she said. "I'm exactly where I need to be." That should have been enough. Should have ended it. But it didn't. He took a small step back, looking toward his partner, who still hadn't moved. A small shake of the head. No citation, no clear violation, but no sense of letting go either. "You're driving early," the older one said. "Mind telling us where to?" She kept her hands where they were. Not clenched, not stiff, just still. "I've got a meeting," she said simply. What kind of meeting? The younger one asked, voice lighter now, like they'd shifted from warning to curiosity. But it wasn't curiosity. It was doubt, always was. She let the question sit between them. Not defiance. Just decision. Business, she answered. Another pause. Another unasked question behind the ones they said out loud, because it wasn't about the time of day, or the road, or the car. It was about her. A black woman behind the wheel, in a town where strangers were noticed. And noticed was just another word for watched, studied, assumed. She hadn't broken a law. They knew that. But they weren't looking for broken laws. They were looking for broken patterns. And she was one. You in sales. Government work? The younger one asked. Still fishing. Something like that. Another almost smile. The kind meant to disarm. Or dismiss. She nodded toward the license still in his hand. Everything there should check out. He looked down. Then up. Something flickered. Not recognition. Not yet. Just the first edge of uncertainty. Like maybe, they'd missed something. She didn't push. Didn't need to. Because when the truth is heavy enough, it doesn't have to shout. It just waits, and lets them feel the weight of what they don't yet understand. The moment changed with 5 words. Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. Not a request. Not a question. A command. Firm. Practiced. Like he'd said it 100 times to people he didn't think would push back. She didn't move. Not out of fear. Out of precision. Her hands stayed where they were, resting on the wheel. Open. Calm. She glanced in the mirror. The younger deputy stood behind her now, his stance braced, like he expected trouble, or wanted it. The older one was still near her window, jaw locked, fingers grazing the edge of his belt. There'd been no accusation, no ticket, no cause, just the slow, quiet escalation of men who'd mistaken power for license. She tilted her head slightly, voice steady. Is there a reason? The older deputy's brow twitched. Ma'am, we're asking you to cooperate. I have, she said. Fully. That was a courtesy. This is a directive, he replied. The younger one stepped closer. We're trained to notice when something feels off. She turned her head, finally looking at him. Off? She asked. Because I'm driving alone before sunrise, or because I don't match the morning traffic. He didn't answer. His eyes tightened. The silence stretched again. Inside the car, she shifted slightly. Not a flinch. A choice. Reaching with the same slow, deliberate motion she'd used all morning, she unlocked the small leather case on the passenger seat, snapped it open. No weapons. No defense. Just the truth. A polished silver badge sat inside. Clean. Centered. Undeniable. Below it, a laminated ID with her photo and her name. Alexandria Monroe. Sheriff. Grant County. She didn't lift it. She didn't have to. The older deputy leaned slightly, eyes narrowing, reading the name, reading it again, like it couldn't be right, like he needed a third pass for it to compute. The younger one froze, visibly, mouth parting just a little, like the air had shifted, and he didn't know how to breathe in it. She held the case open for a moment longer, then closed it, rested it on her lap, hands back on the wheel. I wasn't going to start my first day like this, she said, low and even. But here we are. No anger. No satisfaction. Just reality. Tired and true. Neither of them spoke. The blue and red lights still spun quietly behind them, casting color across her windshield, like a warning that had outlived its purpose. The older deputy swallowed. Hard. You're the sheriff? He asked, voice cracking. She nodded once. Slow. Unbothered. Appointed 2 weeks ago. Sworn in last Thursday. My office is exactly 8 minutes from here. The silence wasn't empty now. It was echo. Because in that moment, they knew. They hadn't just pulled over a driver. They had pulled over the woman who outranked them both. He was still holding her license like it might bite him. Deputy Halverson stared down at the name again, as if a different reading would make it less real. Alexandria Monroe. He mouthed it once under his breath, and you could see the weight of the realization roll over his shoulders, like a wave he didn't know how to brace for. The younger one, Deputy Klein, took a step back, eyes flicking from her face to the badge, then back again. He didn't say a word, didn't have to. His silence was the sound of a man scrambling inside himself, trying to rewrite the last 5 minutes before they got printed. She didn't move. Still seated. Still calm. No need to raise her voice. The badge on her lap had already done the talking. They should have known her name. Not because she was loud about it. Not because she needed them to. But because every officer in Grant County had received the same internal memo 2 weeks ago. New appointment. First in county history. Sheriff Alexandria Monroe. Background in federal investigation. Conflict resolution. Civil rights law enforcement. A quiet resume, with loud results. But names like hers didn't echo long in rooms that only listened for one kind of authority. You were notified, she said softly, breaking the silence. Halverson opened his mouth, but nothing came out. A cough tried to fill the gap. Then ma'am, sheriff, she tilted her head slightly. Not in challenge. In correction. I was asked to step out of my own vehicle without cause, she said. Is that how you greet new leadership here? Klein's face turned a deeper red, lips parting like he might argue. But no words arrived, just the slow, visible collapse of certainty. Like the badge on his chest suddenly felt too light. I didn't realize, he began. No, she said. You didn't. She let it hang there, not to punish, but to mark the line. Because they hadn't seen a sheriff when they walked up to that car. They'd seen something else, something smaller, something dismissible, a shape they'd filled with assumption before a word was spoken, and now, they were choking on it. I assume there's no further reason to detain me, she said. Halverson quickly shook his head. No, Sheriff. Absolutely not. She reached for her badge, tucked it back into the case, clicked it shut with the same quiet certainty she'd driven in with. Good, she said. She shifted the car into gear, but didn't press the gas. Next time, she added, look at the name before you reach for the authority. Then she pulled away, slow, unhurried, leaving 2 men standing in a storm they had created. And as the cruiser lights faded into morning, one truth stayed sharp. They hadn't just misjudged a driver, they had disrespected their own sheriff. Deputy Halverson took off his hat. A reflex. Maybe respect, maybe guilt, but it didn't land. The air around them was already too thick. Sheriff Monroe, he began, voice unsure. If we'd known. She didn't answer. Didn't nod. Didn't blink. Just looked at him. Her expression still, like stone warmed by sunlight. You could feel the words forming in his throat, trying to make themselves bigger than the mistake. There's been some break-ins in the area. That's why she tilted her head slightly. The kind of movement that doesn't interrupt. Just reminds you that you're being watched by someone who sees through it all. Klein was still standing back, jaw locked tight. His hand hovered near his belt again. Not out of habit this time. Just uncertainty. He looked younger now. Smaller. Like the authority he'd leaned on wasn't big enough to hold him anymore. Halverson tried again. It's early. You understand. Dark roads. We've had reports. You've had reports. She repeated. Slow. Not a question. Not sarcasm. Just enough to force him to hear himself. Yes. Well, not directly about you, of course. Of course. That silence after the echo. That's what did it. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't weaponize the moment. She didn't need to. The silence between them did all the work. Halverson shifted his weight, the gravel beneath his boots, giving him away. The tension in his shoulders wasn't defensive anymore. It was regret-shaped, but not the kind that comes from empathy. The kind that comes when you realize you've just stepped on your own reputation and heard the crunch. Look, he said finally. This doesn't have to go anywhere, right? Klein glanced at him, then at her. Still she said nothing. She didn't agree, didn't argue, just held the silence between them, like a mirror, letting them see the pieces of themselves they tried to keep hidden behind protocol and tone. I mean, we're just doing our job, Halverson added, a little too quickly. It was a mistake, misunderstanding. Another pause. Then Sheriff. She exhaled once. No anger in it. Just the sound of someone who had exhaled too many times like this, in too many places that swore they were different. Mistakes have reasons, she said. So do patterns. Klein opened his mouth, then closed it again. She looked at them both, eyes level. You didn't ask what I did. You asked where I was going. Then you decided it wasn't the right direction. The silence that followed didn't beg for forgiveness. It just waited, for the echo of understanding. It never came, and so she let the quiet hold. Let it sting. Let it settle on their shoulders, like the weight of something they'd finally have to carry. By the time the clock hit noon, the story had already arrived. Not through email, not in a memo, through voices just low enough to deny later. She was pulled over. By Halverson and Klein, of all people. She didn't say anything, just showed the badge. No yelling, nope, worse. She was quiet. The station's halls had a hum now. Not the kind that came from fluorescent lights, the kind that came from discomfort walking on its tiptoes. Officers moved a little differently. Shoulders stiff, nods delayed, greetings thinner. A few looked at the floor when they passed each other. A few didn't look at all. Outside her office, the one not yet officially occupied, someone had left a welcome folder on the desk. Inside keys, security codes, a printed department org chart, neatly stapled, like this was going to be a normal transition. But Alexandria Monroe hadn't even crossed the threshold, and the culture was already cracking. They'd read her file, some of them, skimmed it. Really, federal background, strategic reform work in 2 neighboring counties, a stint leading internal affairs in a district that hadn't seen a black woman in uniform, much less at the top. Some assumed she'd be symbolic, a PR bandage, a nod to change with no intention of teeth. Until this morning, now the whispers had changed shape. Did you hear how she handled it? She didn't flinch, didn't even mention it when she walked in. She's got something planned, she doesn't have to plan. Someone muttered. She already won. In the break room a coffee mug clinked harder than it needed to. Officer Drew stared into the microwave, like it might explain what was happening. Beside him, Lieutenant Bryce scrolled slowly through his phone, stopping too long on a message he didn't show anyone. Near the lockers, 2 officers exchanged a glance. Think she's gonna come for people. She doesn't have to. People are gonna trip on their own. Klein hadn't returned from lunch. Halverson had shut his office door, and behind the glass walls of the command suite, some of the old guard sat in quiet wariness, realizing what they'd missed. That authority didn't always walk in with volume. Sometimes it arrived in silence, let people talk, let systems squirm, and waited for the weight of truth to settle on its own. She hadn't made an announcement, hadn't called a meeting, hadn't demanded attention, but still, every hallway buzzed with her name. Sheriff Monroe. Not just a name on the roster anymore, a presence, and by the time her boots stepped onto the station floor, she wasn't walking into the department, she was already inside it. The chairs were filled before the clock struck 8. Uniforms lined the walls, some stiff with starch, others softened by years on the job. A few officers leaned back, arms crossed, casual, others sat straight-backed, pretending this was just another Monday briefing. But it wasn't. Because Sheriff Alexandria Monroe didn't sit, she stood at the front of the room. No podium, no notes, no opening joke to break the ice. Just presence, and presence was enough. Her badge caught the overhead lights, steady over her heart. Her voice, when it came, didn't rise, didn't ask for the room. It already belonged to her. I wasn't hired to be liked, she said, and I didn't show up this morning for your comfort. A shift in the second row, an arm uncrossing. I didn't come here to be welcomed, she continued. I came to rebuild what too many of you let rot. Silence. Not respectful. Tense. The kind that coils behind teeth, waiting to be dismissed. She scanned the room, eyes pausing just long enough on the familiar faces, the ones who had sat in these chairs through 4 previous sheriffs, and treated each one like background noise. This department, she said, has operated on assumptions. About who belongs. About who's suspicious, about who gets the benefit of the doubt, and who gets the flashlight in the face. Someone cleared their throat in the back, quickly regretted it. She took a slow step forward. Some of you think what happened yesterday was about embarrassment, that it was a one-off, a slip, another pause. It wasn't. It was a mirror, and I intend to make sure every one of you sees your reflection in it. She let that settle. Let it root. The room held still. No one scribbled notes. No one reached for their coffee. I'm not here to clean house, she said. I'm here to open the windows. Let the truth in. And if that truth makes you uncomfortable. She leaned in slightly. Good. No one met her gaze now. Not directly. Not for long. Even the smirks were gone. This isn't about race, or gender, or politics, she added. It's about integrity. It's about service. And it's about time. She stepped back, folded her hands loosely in front of her. You'll be held to the oath you took, she said. Not the habits you've picked up. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They stuck. She didn't thank them, didn't dismiss them, just turned and walked out, leaving a silence so heavy it clung to the walls after she was gone, and a room full of officers who suddenly realized they weren't in charge of the rules anymore. The blinds were half drawn, enough light to see clearly, not enough to be seen. Sheriff Monroe stood behind her desk, papers spread like battlefield maps, not chaotic, not messy, just deliberate. Each file opened with care, each page turned with purpose. Personnel records, complaint logs, body cam audits, internal reviews. Nothing based on rumor, nothing based on whispers, just data, patterns, choices made when no one was supposed to be watching. She worked in silence, not out of secrecy, but discipline, like a surgeon scrubbing in. 3 stacks, 3 colors, blue tabs for those whose records held clean lines, officers who listened more than they barked, who de-escalated instead of provoked, few and far between, but there, quiet allies in a loud system. Yellow for the unknowns, inconsistent reports, no formal complaints, but too many blank spaces, people who might follow, or might fold, fence sitters, shaped by the wind, and red for the ones who wore the badge like a weapon, the ones with repeat complaints, uncooperative with civilians, excessive tone, body cam malfunctioned, lack of documentation, red for the ones who saw policy as suggestion, and silence as protection. There were more reds than she expected, more than she could excuse. Each folder was marked without hesitation. She didn't pause for familiar names, didn't flinch at ranks. 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, a half-dozen senior patrol officers, who hadn't had a formal evaluation in years. She tabbed each one, then laid them flat. The colors fanned out across her desk, like a warning system no one else had bothered to build. She stared at the red stack for a long time, not with anger, with clarity, because it was one thing to suspect, another to know. Her phone buzzed. A text from Internal Affairs. Review team ready whenever you are. She didn't reply. Not yet. She looked back down at the rows of names. Blue, yellow, red. She picked up a red folder from the top. Halverson. The incident report from the stop hadn't even made it to the system. Not surprising. Most don't. That's the luxury of being the one who writes the story. But not this time. She tucked his file into a separate folder, labeled it immediate review, then added Klein's. She reached for a pen, and wrote one sentence across the top of a blank page. The badge doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the people we're sworn to protect. Then she capped the pen, and just like that, the audit began, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity, because in a department that had been running on autopilot, it was time someone started reading the black box. The news moved without permission. It slipped through screen doors and under coffee cups. It hung in the air between glances and low voices, like smoke that no one wanted to claim. At Shirley's diner, 2 men leaned over scrambled eggs, their forks idle. You hear she didn't even raise her voice, one said. She didn't have to, the other muttered. They saw that badge and nearly choked on it. In the corner booth, Shirley herself shook her head as she wiped down a laminated menu. About time someone in charge don't need to scream to be heard, she said, mostly to herself. Across town at Clem's barbershop, the clippers paused mid-fade. You see the footage? One customer asked, scrolling on his phone. Klein looked like he saw a ghost. The barber, mid-60s and steady with the razor, let out a dry laugh. First time that boy's ever been quiet. Others weren't laughing. At the gas station, a man in a faded camo jacket muttered to the cashier, "Just what we need." Another political sheriff looking for headlines. The cashier didn't answer, just scanned the chips and watched him walk out without making eye contact. At the Baptist church on Main, Deacon Harris stood outside on the brick steps, arms folded, eyes distant. "My nephew got stopped last month," said he matched a description. They didn't say what kind. He paused. Maybe now someone will start keeping count. And in the library, a retired school teacher named Mrs. Edna Graves read the news off her tablet. Her glasses slid down her nose as she whispered, Sheriff Monroe, trying the name out loud. Then again, firmer, Sheriff Monroe. In quiet homes with blinds half drawn, people remembered their own mornings, being followed, being asked too many questions, being told to calm down when they never raised their voice. Now they watched as someone walked through that same fire, with a badge of her own. It stirred something, not loud, not organized, just real. Down at Franklin's Soul Kitchen, Diane wiped her hands on her apron, and told a regular, she didn't show power, she showed grace. That's heavier. By sunset, even the kids on the basketball court had heard. She shut down with a look. One said, half disbelief, half pride, man, that's cold. The ball bounced once, then again. Or maybe another boy added, that's what real looks like. In the spaces where fear had lived quietly for years, something else was taking shape. Not celebration, not vengeance, just breath. A collective inhale from people who'd been holding theirs too long. Because this wasn't just a new sheriff, it was a new standard. And for the first time in a long time, justice didn't feel like a stranger. The hallway felt tighter now. Same linoleum, same humming lights. But the air had changed. You could feel it in the way people walked, less swagger, more calculation. Deputies who once barked orders, now measured their tone. Those who used to glide through shifts unchecked, now double-checked their paperwork, paused before they spoke. Sheriff Monroe hadn't fired a soul, but it felt like someone had. Every patrol log from the last 60 days was under review. Every traffic stop now required a written justification and body cam footage within 24 hours. No exceptions. No shortcuts. The new protocols weren't loud. They didn't come with press releases or surprise roll calls. They just arrived, quietly, with her signature at the bottom of every directive, her eyes on the data, her silence louder than any siren. At first some grumbled, this ain't how we've done things. She's got a chip on her shoulder. But those voices faded when the audit summaries started stacking up. Names, dates, missing footage, altered timestamps, patterns laid bare in ink and time-stamped pixels. The silence after those findings wasn't defensive. It was self-preserving. Now some officers paused outside her office before knocking, fixing their posture, like they weren't sure who they'd meet on the other side. Some avoided eye contact altogether, and the rest, they adjusted, because power didn't yell from behind closed doors anymore. It moved down the hallway with calm steps and clipped speech. It reviewed, it remembered, it reported. Monroe didn't threaten. She didn't need to. She asked questions, pointed, quiet, unshakable. And when she listened, it wasn't to trap you. It was to make sure your story didn't shift the next time you told it. In the locker room, mirrors that once reflected bravado now showed caution. A few rookies shaved closer, wore their uniforms neater. Officers who used to lean into their belts like they were shields now stood straighter, lighter even. Not all of them. Some still watched her like a storm cloud with legs. But even they moved out of her way in the halls. Because they'd learned something. Authority doesn't always announce itself with a bang. It doesn't kick down doors or wave its rank. Sometimes it drives itself in, badge gleaming, eyes clear, back straight, and changes everything, without ever having to raise its voice. The sidewalk didn't flinch beneath her boots this time. No glances over shoulders, no double takes, no nervous hands fumbling with phones. Just space, space that hadn't been there before. Sheriff Monroe walked alone. No escort, no cruiser trailing, no radio at her hip, just her badge, her name, and the quiet kind of presence that made people take a second breath before speaking. The town looked the same, but it moved differently now. An old man sweeping the steps outside a hardware store tipped his hat as she passed. A teenager locking up his bike, glanced up, nodded once. Even the folks who didn't agree with her walked a little softer when she was near. Not out of fear, but out of the kind of awareness that changes posture. Respect, not because she demanded it, but because she didn't need to. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, a girl sat on the bench waiting for the school bus. Backpack half-zipped, hair pulled back tight. She looked up as Monroe approached. "Are you a superhero?" the girl asked. Monroe slowed, raised an eyebrow. "No," she said, the corners of her mouth turning just slightly. "Just someone who finally got to tell the truth out loud." The girl grinned wide, swinging her legs. I think that's better. Monroe kept walking. The roads that once tried to shrink her, tried to remind her she didn't quite fit, now made room, not by changing their lines, but by shifting the weight of who they listened to. Past the barber shop, past the courthouse, past the station. Eyes followed her, but not like before. Not with suspicion, with measure, with recognition. Respect had nothing to do with her title. It wasn't the uniform, wasn't the badge. It was in how she stood when they tried to make her sit, how she spoke when silence was safer, how she didn't flinch, even when they expected her to fold. And people noticed. Not everyone agreed with her methods. Some thought she moved too fast. Some whispered that she made the department look weak, but even those critics had stopped speaking with the same certainty. Because it's hard to argue with results. Harder still to argue with a woman who doesn't blink when she's being watched. Sheriff Monroe didn't walk to prove anything. She walked because the road was hers too. The same road they told her to step off. And now, with every quiet nod, every small wave from a porch, every child staring wide-eyed from a bus window, she was reminded that the truth, when walked long enough, doesn't just speak. It reshapes the path beneath your feet. They were already waiting when she walked in. Same chairs, same conference room. Same two men. Deputy Halverson sat stiff, arms crossed tight across his chest like armor. Deputy Klein kept his eyes on a speck on the table, jaw flexing every few seconds, like he was chewing on regret. Sheriff Monroe didn't sit. She didn't need the table between them, just space, and the weight of truth. This isn't about discipline, she said. It's about clarity. No one moved. You made assumptions, she continued. Not just about me, about what this uniform entitles you to, about who has to explain themselves, and who doesn't. Klein blinked. Halverson looked away for the first time. I'm not here to ask if you're sorry, she said. I'm here to ask if you understand. Neither answered. That was fine. She stepped forward. This badge, she said, tapping it once with her finger, slow and deliberate, doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to me either. They looked up, finally. It belongs to every person you've pulled over without cause. Every resident you looked through instead of at. Every kid who learned to keep their hands visible, just in case. Klein shifted. Halverson opened his mouth, then thought better of it. I don't need your apology, she added. I need your awareness. The silence stretched again. This time it wasn't awkward. It was accountability. Starting next month, you'll be assigned to community rotation, she continued. Unarmed. No vehicle. No patrol. You'll walk. You'll listen. You'll report to the very people you used to see only from behind glass. Klein looked up, startled. What exactly are we? You're going to learn, she said, cutting him off gently. And if you can't, you'll step aside for someone who can. She didn't threaten. She invited clarity. Then she stepped back. Hands folded, spine straight. You can keep wearing the badge, she said, but you'll learn what it means every day. She turned to leave, stopped at the door. One more thing. They both looked up, waiting for a final order. But what she gave them wasn't a command. It was a reminder. It was a reminder. Respect, she said, isn't what you're owed for wearing the uniform. It's what you return for being allowed to. She walked out, left the door open, and by the time her footsteps faded down the hall, the room behind her wasn't just still, it was changed. Because in Grant County now, the badge didn't just sit on a chest. It carried the weight of everyone it used to ignore, and in the hands of Sheriff Alexandria Monroe, it finally meant something worth saluting. If this story moved you, share it. Not for outrage, but for awareness. Because dignity doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, and changes everything. Subscribe, for more true stories of justice, grace, and quiet power. Drop a comment. What moment hit you hardest? Like if you believe respect must be earned, no matter the uniform.